Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Gentex Multimedia's live streaming for Australian Indian Radio. And hey, welcome to the show on this 23rd day of June. And it is a much cooler day out there today and not as sunny, and that might be the reason. So it's cloudy and 15 degrees outside. That's in the city. Well, right now, let's take a look at what's making news today in this brief news segment. And don't forget that at 10 o'clock, we'll have Usha Chandra right here in this studio joining us for the weekly real estate update, and there's lots to talk about. Well, right now, good news. Queensland Health have advised for a further easing of restrictions of COVID-19 that will allow more people into spiritual homes to practice physical on-site worship. Well, when is this going to take place? So this will be, taking place from this Friday. So the increased numbers allowed at the worship services will be indoor services can grow from one person per 2 square meters to 3 people per 4 square meters, an increase in capacity of about 50%. There is no limit on numbers of outdoor worship services. Place of worship can have 100% capacity for indoor worship events with ticketed and allocated individual sittings. So which is good news. And sharing a meal at pre and post worship gatherings. So as we know that, at many places of worship, they do share those meals. So buffet, self-service food and share plates will be permitted at pre and post worship gatherings. So now at a temple or something like that, buffet self-service food will be permitted as of Friday the 25th. And removal of the COVID-safe industry plans. To make things simpler for industries, all industry plans will be removed and are no longer required in their current format. They will be replaced with a simple universal checklist for all industries to be used instead, and along with supporting guidance material which will focus on the key areas: density, check-in apps, cleaning, and staff wellness. The checklist will need to be displayed in a place of worship. So Queensland Health are currently seeking Chief Health Officer's approval on this checklist, and it will be shared with us as soon as it becomes available. So which is quite good. So this news is just breaking news. It has just come in hot off the press. These relaxations and changes are largely made possible by the success of Check-in Queensland app that has sped up the contact tracing. As a result, the Check-in Queensland app will become mandatory for places of worship from 1 a.m. Friday 9 July and will only be required for indoor worship services including weddings and funerals. So we trust that this information is useful to you, and right now we'll go and look at some of the other news that's making today. Well, first day in office for Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce.
The normal rituals of a new leader, being sworn in at Government House.
I will well and truly serve the people of Australia in the office of Deputy Prime Minister.
Technically, Barnaby Joyce was being sworn in today as a minister. There is no actual position of Deputy Prime Minister or party leader that requires being sworn in. But some aspects of the ritual were missing. Normally, the ascension of a new political leader or minister is greeted with a torrent of statements of welcome from lobby groups and proclamations of how much those lobby groups look forward to working with the newly anointed one. But this has not been the case in the second coming of Barnaby Joyce. The rural sector was particularly notable for its silence. The National Farmers Federation, for example, did not release a statement, nor did many of the other rural lobby groups.
Those major groups in the agriculture sector and in rural Australia are not standing up to support the revolving door.
That might be explained by the fact that Barnaby Joyce's return to the Nationals' leadership has crystallised just how far the traditional party of the bush has strayed from its agricultural base and is seen these days instead as a party of the mining industry. When pressed for a comment on the change of Nationals' leadership, the NFF told 7:30 it supports an economy-wide target of net carbon zero by 2050 with 2 important caveats. that an economic pathway to neutrality is clearly identified and that farmers aren't disadvantaged by a further regulatory burden. So the peak farming body supports an economy-wide target of net carbon zero by 2050. But as a backbencher, the new leader of the Nationals threatened to cross the floor against exactly that sort of target. He got momentum for his return to the job from colleagues who say they are dead against such a target.
Are the regional Australians who want the job opportunities from net zero, including the National Farmers Federation, wrong?
The sort of place that we'll be really focusing on that they maintain their job is in the member for Capricornia seat. We're going to be absolutely focused, laser-like, that the coal miners in the seat of Capricornia keep their job.
Notice he was talking all about miners' jobs, not farmers. The disquiet from groups like the NFF and Farmers for Climate Action points to some of the risks the Nationals have taken by restoring Joyce to the leadership, punting on his cut-through political qualities to shore up support in regional Queensland seats, as well as potentially win seats from Labor in the New South Wales Hunter Valley and the Northern Territory. The early lukewarm reception from the bush is not a good thing.
I'm just gobsmacked that there isn't somebody who could bring a new way of doing things, some new integrity, a broader understanding of what rural and farming people want for Australia. It isn't about representing me. It's not about representing any of the industries, the people I work with all over Australia.
Joyce certainly has a more aggressive political style.
I think I'm looking at someone here who might be under a little bit of pressure himself. A little bit of pressure himself.
Pitt joins me. Last week, Nationals Resources Minister Keith Pitt posed a direct challenge to the PM's publicly stated goal that Australia would seek to hit net zero emissions, preferably by 2050. Pitt declared the Nationals had never been consulted about this or agreed to it. But 7:30 revealed last night that Pitt had attended a series of Cabinet committee meetings to plan how Australia could reach net zero by 2050.
Did you raise any objections in those meetings about, the Nats not having agreed to that target? And if not, then how can you now claim that you weren't consulted?
Well, firstly, clearly I won't be breaching Cabinet confidentiality. I shouldn't be surprised about that.
I think the reality is that the farmers and the primary producers that I work with are way ahead in this discussion. They know it's coming. They're already adapting. They're already bringing new technologies into their workplaces to actually deal with this stuff.
There has also not been universal acclaim from rural women about Joyce's return either. Alana Johnson, one of the founders of Australian Women in Agriculture, says Joyce will have to prove himself.
I'm waiting to see.
Here we'll have to, we welcome everyone's comment, and comments keep coming. And JP Sonny is always commenting. Thank you for all your comments. And he says that ABC is always against Morrison governments, and many people would probably agree with that viewpoint. That many times they are leaning towards the other side. Well, right now there have been calls for an integrity commission.
In December 2018, the Morrison government announced plans to introduce an integrity commission, but its model was criticised as weak and lacking transparency.
This is a real proposal with real resources, real teeth, but one that I think protects our Commonwealth public administration from the weaknesses of the many other systems.
This is file footage from 2018.
Progress has stalled. The government blames the COVID pandemic. Public appetite for a federal watchdog remains strong, with the ABC's latest Australia Talks national survey showing 9 in 10 respondents believe one's needed. Today, almost 60 lawyers and academics have penned an open letter to the Prime Minister urging him to deliver on his pledge. Helen Haines is the federal independent member for Indi, and David Harper is a former Victorian Court of Appeal judge, now at the Australia Institute. David Harper and Helen Haines, thank you very much to both of you for being with us. Mr Harper, first to you, why has this group of eminent lawyers and other people decided that now is the moment to sign this open letter?
The government and opposition have been talking about the need for an integrity commission in the federal sphere for now 2.5 years and more. Both promised to bring in such a commission if elected, and yet nothing has happened, although we're now well into the 46th Parliament.
Helen Haines, is the government taking this matter anywhere, and what will that take to change?
Clearly, Lee, the government isn't committed to taking this matter anywhere. Today we had 59 eminent Australians sign an open letter to call on the Prime Minister to act. The only thing that we have from this government is a draft exposure bill that was brought to us months ago and a consultation process that roundly trashed that draft exposure bill, demonstrating that that bill is not fit for purpose and nothing else has come forward to us. So I'm not surprised that today an open letter has been calling the government to act.
So the Integrity Commission at this stage is still work in progress and has not been delivered. Now, there's been so much talk about climate change and everything. Climate change, of course, is a big, huge topic, and there's lots of debate on that topic as well. But yesterday, when we were looking at, the Great Barrier Reef, and people were saying that the deteriorating condition of that. Well, if people are really concerned about the Great Barrier Reef, they would better leave it alone. I mean, leave it alone. Don't go diving there, don't have snorkels in there, don't have the outboard motors going on top of the reef. It is all, the human intervention into the natural habitat is what's causing that as well. Of course, there are other big issues, which is another debate, but also, if we are really concerned, we would leave it alone and let it grow, before we open it. So, but people are not prepared to do that. They're all just prepared to jump on the bandwagon and start complaining.
Eleanor Short has seen firsthand the remarkable rise of Australia's LNG industry.
I reckon I can do that. Yep, all right, thanks Cole.
With her husband Jamie, Eleanor runs an electrical contracting business in Chinchilla, west of Brisbane, servicing nearby coal seam gas wells.
When you go down the main street at lunchtime, you can't find a park, so town is busy.
From humble beginnings, the industry has grown to become an export powerhouse, and things don't seem to be slowing down. For the past 10 years, companies such as Shell and Origin have been funneling much of the gas north to processing plants at Gladstone, where it's loaded onto ships and sent to Asia. On the other side of the country, it's a similar story. There's been huge investments in LNG plants in response to surging worldwide demand for gas.
It's really been phenomenal. Over the last 10 to 15 years, the industry has invested over $200 billion US, which is about 300 billion Aussie, to build the industry to a point where we are now competing for the top slot globally as an LNG exporter. So it's Qatar and Australia. It's quite amazing.
On the back of the splurge, Woodside is aiming to build the $16 billion Scarborough LNG development off WA's north coast. But there are growing doubts about the prospects for Scarborough thanks to an extraordinary turn of events last month. Within hours, Woodside's partners and global oil majors Shell, Chevron and ExxonMobil were hit with strikes from investors demanding greater action to cut pollution. It came as the International Energy Agency argued no new oil and gas project should be built if the world is to meet the Paris climate commitments. Despite the upheaval, Woodside says the case for Scarborough is strong.
The reservoir has almost no CO2. The train that we propose to build at the Pluto site will be very low emissions intensity. So the product that we're going to offer to customers in Asia will be low cost and low carbon.
But critics say
low price and low carbon, and that would be the way forward for the economy. But here's the report on Great Barrier Reef. And there goes this outboards on top of the reef.
If you're lucky enough to visit the Great Barrier Reef, it's easy to see why it's one of the 7 natural wonders of the world.
You can actually see it from outer space, and it's this huge area that's the size of France, which is home to the largest continuous reef system in the world.
Scientists like Professor Ove Gullberg have long warned about the threat to the reef, but news that it could be now put on the World Heritage Committee's in danger list supposedly took Environment Minister Susan Lee by surprise.
They've singled out Australia for this unprecedented approach without foreshadowing the decision against the advice that they were giving us only a week ago, and in a way that actually makes no sense.
Susan Lee seems to have overlooked the federal government's own reports on the state of the reef. The most recent, in 2019, downgraded the reef's long-term outlook from poor to very poor, citing climate change and deteriorating water quality as serious threats to its future. It was this Great Barrier Reef Outlook report that helped convince the World Heritage Committee to act now.
This draft decision is not a surprise. This is consistent with the concern that UNESCO and the World Heritage Committee have expressed about Australia's management of the Great Barrier Reef for the best part of a decade.
1, 2, 3.
Back in 2011, the World Heritage Committee first flagged its concerns about the state of the reef when Julia Gillard's Labor government signed off on a huge liquefied natural gas project inside the World Heritage Area near Gladstone.
That is great news for Gladstone, it's great news for Queensland, it's great news for Australia.
The LNG project and planned expansion of coal ports up and down the Queensland coast.
And the debate continues as we know. There is talks of progress, moving ahead, getting the country ahead, exports and productivity, then also the care for the environment is there as well. So it's a weighted debate. A debate which has some very, very strong people behind them on both sides of the debate. Well, right now, looking at Queensland, because Queensland Health now denies fully vaccination.
In a Gold Coast hospital, an 80-year-old man is spending his last days without seeing one of his sons.
A heartbreaking doesn't even seem to suffice how it feels for us.
It's hard to watch him hang on and cling on to life just so he can see his son.
Mark Killian and his wife Onali are stuck in quarantine in a Sydney hotel room.
So let me just show you quickly. That's a king-size bed. Let me walk over here.
They're both fully vaccinated, but still have to wait 7 more days before they can leave. They flew in from Los Angeles in an attempt to see Mark's father, France, who was in a critical condition with pancreatic cancer.
It's up and down, and not just daily but hourly. He's extremely weak. Is at this point sometimes not able to even talk to us.
Despite 3 successive negative COVID tests and an offer to charter their own flight to Queensland and wear hazmat suits, Queensland Health refused to grant Mark Killian and his wife an exemption to enter the Sunshine State.
Here we are offering to wear full PPE, to have anklets, anything that they ask, we will do.
They're willing to go over and above, and in every respect, they've done, taken every reasonable precaution, and still nothing. There's no, we don't understand why there's no solution.
This is amazing. Mark Killian's brother Paul lives on the Gold Coast with his wife Marion. They're hoping an online petition will convince Queensland Health to change its mind.
We've gotten so much support. We're at over 40,000 signatures now. And I haven't seen a single comment that's come through that, is in support of what the government is doing.
For days, the Queensland government has been insisting the measures are essential for public safety. But today, the Queensland Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk suggested it's ultimately a federal responsibility.
It's absolutely tragic. These issues are tragic. Unfortunately, the national guidelines, so it's what's agreed to federally, is the 14 days of quarantine for people coming overseas. That applies to everybody.
Can you intervene in this case, or will you?
Well, if the federal government wants to talk to both states, I'm happy to facilitate that, but this applies to everybody.
7:30 understands Queensland's Chief Health Officer, Dr Jeanette Young, has written to her federal counterpart asking for urgent clarification around quarantine rules for people who are fully vaccinated. Both the Queensland Premier and Dr Young were unavailable for interview, although Dr Young did briefly speak about vaccination policy at a media conference today.
So that's another debate there, allowing people on compassionate reason if they are fully vaccinated or going through the process that has been put in place. As the Premier said, one rule applies to all. Well, right now, let's go to Sydney, where there has now been a spike in the COVID cases.
An urgent school pickup sparked by an unlinked COVID scare.
Are you worried about the schools on top of it? A little bit worried. It's a bit shocking.
The Year 3 student's positive result came in this morning, prompting the hasty health response.
In this case, we don't have, on preliminary information, a source for this child's exposure, so we are looking for an intermediate source.
We just all have to stay calm. Yeah, nothing we can do except get tested.
Out of classes and to the clinic, nearby testing sites were overflowing. The Bondi cluster has grown by 10 and now stands at 21. 8 of those 10 are close contacts of other cases and were isolating. 1 is from the Illawarra region. Of the remaining 2, 1 is linked to the cluster, a woman in her 20s who works at Bondi Junction. The 10th case is of key concern. Authorities are investigating how the primary school student at St Charles Waverley picked up the virus.
What's pleasing is that it's in the geographical area that we know we are concerned that transmission could have happened.
The list of contact tracing locations across Greater Sydney and the Illawarra Shoalhaven continues to grow. So too does the scope of the mask mandate. Those regions will have compulsory masks on public transport and indoor public areas until 12:01 a.m. Thursday.
The real challenge for us at this stage is to prevent any super spreading events, because we know that if you are in a group of people, if one person has the virus, the level of contagion is so high that we're concerned that everybody might get the virus.
That concern has prompted expanded testing advice for the epicentre of the cluster. Anyone who visited the Bondi Junction Westfield from the 12th to the 18th of June is being urged to get tested.
The Delta variant of the COVID virus is actually a gold medalist when it comes to jumping from one person to another.
One of the biggest questions being posed is if Sydney is headed for another lockdown. The Premier says because all but one case is linked, she's feeling relatively confident. And New South Wales is on track to reach 2 million vaccines administered by early next week.
While this school at the centre of COVID concern holds its breath.
Remote learning for the next few days and then early school holidays. So kids will be happy.
A sigh of relief for some students. Tim Swanston, ABC News, Sydney.
A sigh of relief for some students, but many students have been, distracted in their studies. If it wasn't for the pandemic, in the normal course of action, they would have been coming to normal classes and continuing with their studies. So, all the students, during 2020 and 2021, their studies would not be normal as compared to, if we didn't have the pandemic, because regardless of how much, online learning you do, that being in the classroom, being in front of the teacher and just going on with the normal, without these distractions of the pandemic, or of course always in the back of your mind as well, which we can play havoc on your mind as well. Well, right now let's take a few messages of support for India Day Fair and apology from Gopia, Queensland, that this year the India Day Fair is not at Roma Street Parklands. So I repeat that it is not at Roma Street Parklands, but it will be at a much bigger and better venue, which is the South Bank Piazza. And we are so excited about that, but our apologies for any confusion out there. This is not happening at Roma Street Parklands, so we will put out a release today.
What I'll do.
Hello everyone, I'm Councillor Angela Owen, and it's with great pleasure once again that I throw my support behind India Day Fair to be held this year on the 15th of August at Suncorp Piazza at South Bank in Brisbane. This is for many years, and it is wonderful to know that it is continuing and growing from strength to strength.
wonderful to be here tonight to celebrate Gopio, and with all our Indian friends. There's one thing we've got on the Gold Coast. We are so blessed. We're blessed with wonderful weather. We're blessed with the way we've handled pandemic, and we're so blessed with the Indian society that is so generous to help not just Indian descent, but also the wider community. So here's celebration. I love being here.
Gopio Queensland is organizing the India Fair Day. We at Gopio Gold Coast is supporting it, and we encourage all of Indians in Gold Coast to join them. All the best.
And thank you very much, Pradeep Gorasia there, and Councillor Angela Awan, and of course, Mayor Tom Tate. Well, right now, ladies and gentlemen, that's about all we have time for in this segment, and we will have the real estate update coming up at 10 a.m. With Usha Chandra of Globe Net Realty. So don't forget that on Wednesdays we have the weekly real estate update, and on Thursdays we have the travel update with Tanvi Goyal of Oz India Travels. Well, right now, that's about all we have time for in this segment, and wonderful, and thank you, Sonita, for your comments as well, and it is wonderful to get the feedback out there from the community as well. We try and do the best we can. So, as I mentioned before, well, it's notched up one more degree now. It's 16 degrees and cloudy in the center of the city in Brisbane. And until the next segment, it's goodbye from me. Have a wonderful day and remain safe.